G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Kaila Colbin from Boma Global, based in beautiful Christchurch, New Zealand. Thanks for your time today, Kaila.
Pleasure to be here.
How we know each other, the first question. So Peter, our podcast editor, has been reaching out to female-led businesses around Australia, UK, New Zealand and Canada. And we're thankful that you have come on the show for us.
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. As a female-led business, as a business generally, I'm just stoked to talk about what we're up to.
Great. Well, tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, so Boma is an organization dedicated to helping us be more intentional and intelligent about the future. And the way that we do that, there are two kind of primary streams of activity that we use to do that. One of them is we do executive leadership development, professional training, corporate professional training. We run directors programs, executive programs, things like that. And the second is we do major events. So with the leadership training, we focus on the intersection of what we call what you need to know and who you need to be. So what you need to know is all of the external vectors of change that are affecting our world, exponentially accelerating technologies, disruptive business models, but also, the political change that's happening, changes in kind of our societal expectations, shift towards ESG, things like that. And then the who you need to be side is who do we need to be as leaders in order to successfully navigate that kind of disruption and complexity. On the event side, we're not an events company. If somebody came to us, if a telecom came to us and said, we're doing our big sales conference, that's not what we do. We run events where they are proprietary events, where we feel our unique view of the world, our unique curation ability, our unique ability to build incredible experiences has something to offer to move the needle on the direction of travel, and typically where we have an anchor sponsor to support that.
Great. And just going back, what does ESG stand for?
Oh, sorry. It's environmental and social governance, I believe.
Great.
Yep.
Excellent.
It's basically like triple bottom line, that B Corp, like that kind of shift to understanding corporate responsibility.
Yep. Great. And so how do you charge your fees, or where do the sales mainly come from? Is it packages or?
Yeah. So sales for our training programs, as of right now, they're basically people just pay to attend a program. We are working through right now as an organization what it would look like to have packages for organizations. That's an area we're really excited to get into. And then for our events, it's sponsors and ticket sales.
Yep, great. And how did you start out?
Oh gosh. So I spent 10 years running TEDx Christchurch. Mm-hmm. And 1 year running TEDx Scott Base in Antarctica.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I spent 4 years involved in an organization called SingularityU University, which is dedicated to the study of exponentially accelerating technologies and their impact on humanity. They're based in Silicon Valley. Brought them to New Zealand in 2016. We ran the SingularityU New Zealand Summit for 1,400 people, and then brought them to Australia in 2018, where I ran the SingularityU Australia Summit at the ICC. Some other folks have picked up the SingularityU Australia piece now, but there are 4 of us. So my organization, Boma, is actually a global organization, and there are 4 of us who co-founded the global entity. So that's myself. One of my business partners is kind of my counterpart in Germany. So he's the guy who ran TEDx Berlin and who brought Singularity University to Germany. Mm-hmm. My counterpart in France. And then our 4th partner is a lady called Lara Stein, who's based in New York. She created the entire TEDx program at TED and then left TED to join Singularity University and lead their global expansion. And so when we launched, I've got Boma New Zealand, my German partner is Boma Germany, my French partner has Boma France. Lara's job has been to grow the global network. And so we've now added partners in India, in China, in Chile, Brazil, Poland, a few other places. And really what this work we're doing now is almost Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots looking forwards, you can only connect them looking backwards. What we're doing now is almost the inevitable evolution of all this work we've been doing together for the past decade and more, of bringing together disparate ideas, thinking differently about the future, opening people up to possibilities that they might not have otherwise considered, creating experiences that make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and make you excited about the world and where it's going. And so that's what we're up to today.
Great. And before COVID, was much of your delivery online, or it was mostly in person?
Mostly in person.
Yeah, and I assume then you had to pivot through COVID to online.
Yeah, we absolutely did. So as a global entity, we pivoted on the 23rd of March. We ended up running a 24-hour around the world COVID summit. So it was really early on in the piece, 23rd of March, which started in New Zealand. We had a 2-hour chunk in New Zealand featuring one of our speakers was Dr. Susie Wiles, who you may have seen her. Her work to basically communicate the science of COVID has gone global. She was named one of the BBC's top 100 most influential somethings. Anyway, so we started in New Zealand and then handed off to our counterparts in Japan, who handed off to India, who handed off, and we just kept the ball moving around the world. So that was really early on in the piece. And then in terms of our leadership and training programs, one of the programs that we run in New Zealand is the Dare to Lead program, which is, I trained with Brené Brown, who is a pretty renowned researcher and academic who studies courage, empathy, vulnerability, and shame. She's written 5 global bestsellers. She's given a couple of TED Talks, one of them top 5 of all time. So, 50
I love
million.
I love her saying, clear is kind.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I trained with her to facilitate her Dare to Lead curriculum, which is her work specifically as it applies to the organizational context. We deliver that curriculum face-to-face. Typically it's a three-day program, but we launched a virtual version during lockdown last year. And, I wasn't at all sure how it was going to go. We've done a lot of, webinars, but at that time, the program was 2 days long. And so we ran it as a 2 hours, 4 days a week for 2 weeks. And, it's a big ask. It's a big commitment. It's serious work. It's not like, a webinar that you tune into, but you're also doing your email.
Yep.
And the feedback was as high as the face-to-face program. It's been absolutely amazing. And so now, even though we're fully up and running in New Zealand and pretty much no restrictions, we still offer the virtual program, because what we find is that rather than being a kind of sorry substitute for the physical, there are advantages to virtual that we can't replicate in physical, and vice versa. And so they're just 2 different products, and people just choose which one they want.
Yeah, got it. And what year did Boma start?
We launched publicly in 2018.
Yep.
I don't remember when we actually signed the documents. Obviously, we were doing a fair bit of work before the public launch, but yeah, mid 2018 was our launch.
And how old were you when that launched?
How old was I when that launched? I was just shy of 45.
Yep.
45.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth?
Yeah, I mean, so here in New Zealand, we started with, I don't know, maybe 3 people, and we're just adding our 11th now. We're adding a creative director.
Yep.
Globally, we started with Boma New Zealand, Boma France, Boma Germany, and I mentioned already we've added country partners in a whole bunch of different areas. Those would probably be the 2 kind of top of mind numbers that I can share for you.
Great. And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Oh gosh, does anyone feel? I definitely don't feel like we've succeeded. I feel like I often have a mental runway metaphor going on, airplane off the runway, and I definitely feel like we are off the runway.
Yep.
I don't, and as I think any of your audience will appreciate, as soon as you get to cruising altitude, you need to set a new cruising altitude, right?
Yep.
But I don't feel like we've gotten to a cruising altitude yet. I feel like we're off the runway. We've got good momentum, but we never reach the top of that mountain, to throw a totally different metaphor into the mix.
What does success look like to you?
I mean, success has to be tied to outcomes, right? Like the whole premise of the organization is for us to build a more intentional and intelligent future. And so what success looks like to me is that we can point to, one of the things we do with our training programs is we use an evaluation model that is really well known and established in the training world, which is called Kirkpatrick. And it's a 4-stage model. And the 4 stages are: number 1, did people enjoy the training? Number 2, did they learn what they were meant to learn? Number 3, did they change any behavior as a result of what they learned? And number 4, what was the outcome of that behavior change? And so when we run our programs, we survey pretty constantly, and we survey at the end of each program those first 2 things. Did you enjoy it? Did you learn what you were meant to learn? But then we follow up, after a month, what changed as a result? After 3 months, what were the outcomes of that behavior change? And as of now, I would say we're still dealing with relatively small numbers. So don't read too much into it, but we're at like 100% of respondents saying yes, changed behavior. Yes. Right. Positive outcomes as a result of those behavior change.
Fantastic. Number 1 thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
To marketing a fast growing business, I mean, I feel like there's two pieces of two kind of conflicting schools of thought, and I hold both. So one piece of it is, obviously, when you're in startup phase, inevitably we're resource constrained, right? And so our need to focus is absolutely essential. But the other pieces, and with marketing in particular, is I feel like there is an element of hustle and opportunism that any kind of startup entrepreneur needs to embrace. And like this, especially when you're in that stage of looking for product market fit, when you're maybe not as far off the runway, or like building up speed but haven't gotten off the runway altogether, or still just trying to kind of work out what is the best way for us to focus. That ability to go, hey, I was, at the gym and I was chatting to the person next to me and they've got a thing. And I said, hey, we could do something with you, right? And the reason I say these are 2 conflicting schools of thought should be obvious, right? Like, how do you simultaneously focus and jump on those opportunities? And one of the models we use regularly is a model called, we have a thing we call the innovation execution paradox. But that's built on a structure that comes from Barry Johnson, who came up with polarity management. And polarity management is this idea of looking at things where there are 2 poles to a concept, where those poles are often viewed as antagonistic, but actually they can be complementary. And so these poles of like focus and opportunism, if we think about them as opposites, then it's like, well, how can you be opportunistic when you're trying to be focused? Or how can you be focused when you're trying to be opportunistic? In reality, if we see them as polarities, where like breathing, you've got inhaling and exhaling, they seem like opposites, but actually they have to work together. These 2 things of focus and opportunism need to work together, where we're going, okay, I'm going to pursue this opportunity, and then I'm going to be focused about why I'm pursuing it, and what, really clear on what we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to test, what assumptions we're making, so that when new opportunities come up, I can know, oh, this is one I should jump on and grab, even though it wasn't intentional, I hadn't planned it, versus this is one I should just kind of let slide. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Cool.
And do you use the Net Promoter Score?
We do.
What's your number?
Well, so we use the number because we run so many different events.
Yep.
We run Net Promoter Scores for each different thing that we do. So our most recent one that we did was for our last transformational executive program, and our Net Promoter Score was 75.
That is phenomenal, Kaila.
We're very, very proud of it. Very proud of it.
For the audience, it's not a percentage, but it's hard to get to even 50, and anything 70 and above is exceptional. So well done.
Thank you.
And how did you fund your business?
Self-funded.
So no investors, bank finance, or grants at all?
So you'll recall I mentioned we're a global network of local partners. So we have Boma Global, and then we have individual Bomas all around the world. So the individual Bomas are funded by the folks who have those Bomas. So Boma New Zealand was funded through capital injection that I put into it. Boma Global, we did get venture funding from various investors around the world, largely European based, but also some, I think, in the US.
Great. And was that difficult to raise money?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
I
that was
mean,
a,
here's the thing. So I'll tell you my experience with capital raising and with selling sponsorships. For our events, we sell sponsorships.
hmm.
My experience is that it is both difficult and easy.
Yep.
So when it works, when you meet the right person and you make the right pitch, it happens like that. It's not like if it's not work, if it's difficult, if I have to pull you along, it's probably not going to happen at all.
Yep.
But when it works, it can happen super fast.
Hmm.
And so the difficult bit is really just the persistence of how many different people you have to talk to until you find the one with whom it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Raising money is fucking hard. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And if you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, I love my industry. I feel like it's the area. I mean, for me, it's kind of an ikigai area. It's an area where I feel like I'm really good at it, where people will pay for it, where it's important work. Certainly, the executive development, leadership development, corporate professional training. It's an area where if we say corporate training, that has the risk of sounding maybe less than exciting to people. But the way that I think about it is that, we're facing a world with massive, complex, and interrelated problems,
Mm-hmm.
not just COVID, but climate change and political change and, questions about the way that we've structured our underlying institutions and, the economic system that we've built. Like we're facing some really thorny issues here. And those issues were created by leaders who were trained in using the systems that we've used in the past to train people.
Mm.
And so you can never change a problem with the same thinking that you use to create it. So what I'm looking at here is how can we build the kind of leaders that the future needs us to build in order to be able to effectively tackle those problems? And that's a really, to me, it's a really exciting space to be playing in.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Let's see. We've had some points of stress. One of the things that I'm always super mindful of is tracking unearned revenue. And this to me is one of the most critical. If people are new to small business and newer to accounting and wanted to know one thing that they have to really be paying attention to, I would say deeply understanding what it means to have unearned revenue, which you may well be aware of, but I'll just clarify for anyone listening who doesn't know what I'm talking about here. So let's say, for example, that I'm running an event, but we'll take a real world scenario. I'm running an event in May. It's called ETIPU. It's the Boma New Zealand Agri Summit. It's New Zealand's premier food and fiber summit, focused on, where we go with our primary industries. We've received sponsorship for that event. We've received ticket sales for that event. We're using that money to build the event and to pay staff and to pay overheads, et cetera. If we use all of the money that we've currently received from sponsorship to pay staff and to run other things that we're doing or whatever, and we get to the event and we can't afford to run the event, we can't afford to pay the catering or the venue, then obviously we're in really big trouble. So that money that we've received from the sponsorship is unearned revenue, which means we haven't actually earned it until we've delivered what we've been paid for. And so the need for us as small businesses to be constantly looking forward to be able to say, will we be able to deliver on the commitments that we're making today? And do we have the financial stability and wherewithal and structures to be able to deliver that? I think that's a really super important piece. So a couple of years ago, we had it happen where I was looking forward to those obligations and going, I think we're going to be in trouble, or we might not be in trouble, but we certainly have a very significant risk of being in trouble, of looking forward. And so we had to do a local restructure, and it's incredibly stressful, incredibly challenging, incredibly stressful for all the people involved, affected by it. But better than having the whole company go under, right?
Yeah.
So, deeply understanding that forward, those forward commitments, I'd say, for any business owner.
So two things to that then really is your cash flow forecasting, but also a budget to make sure that the event is going to make a profit. So keeping a close eye on those numbers to make sure that.
Yeah. It is cash flow forecasting and budget. Yes. Yep.
We got there. And what area in business?
One of the things I run, so I'm a nerd. I love numbers.
Yeah.
I can
Me
geek
too.
out on numbers all day long.
Yep.
And so we do cash flow forecasting. We keep a close budget, but we keep one of the things that we track really closely, which honestly, I need to write an article about this because I feel like the way we calculate it, we're one of the,
Yeah.
I don't know if other people do it this way, but we track our runway.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we track our runway, because most organizations, startups that track runway are pre-revenue. And
Yep.
so they're looking at it going, okay, we got $1 million or 10 million in investment and our burn is, $500,000 a month. And so we've got 20 months to go before we run out of money. That's our
Yep.
runway, right? That's pretty straightforward. We're revenue generating, but we still track runway. And the way that we track runway is we go, okay, if we were not to bring in a single additional dollar, so based only on the money that we have 100% confirmation is coming in, that we've already in, it doesn't have to be in yet. So it's basically, cash on hand plus receivables, minus our forward commitments. So the hard costs associated with our forward commitments. So minus, the cost of the venue for the event that we've got coming up, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take that number, that net number, and we divide it out on our general overhead run rate.
It tells you how many months you've got left.
Tells us how many months we've got left, and we know that number will never. It's never a forecast, right? It's never going to be true because we're bringing in money.
Yeah.
Right. So we wouldn't keep going at that rate if we weren't bringing in money, right? But what it does is it starts to give us a sense of like, what is our forward stability look like? What is our, it gives some more meaning to the balance sheet and to the P&L.
That's good. I like that. And what area in business, sorry, did I just ask that? No, I was about to, sorry. In what area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Oh, definitely patience. I mean, definitely as a leader, the area of business I've had to work on the most is how to have more patience with the team, how to create more space for the team to grow, finding the right balance between delegation and setting them up for success, and sharing the insights that I have, because I do have insights, without being smothering. Like that is just my eternal journey.
So by patience, you mean you've got this overbearing sense of, come on, we should be pushing more work out, etc. Yeah.
Come on, all of it now.
Yeah. Whereas obviously the team are employees, so they don't have as much drive or ambition, and often.
I wouldn't say that. I think that would be unfair to the team. I think I work with an outstanding team of human beings who all care desperately. So the reason for me to be more patient is not because I need to understand that they're not as excited as I am. I feel that, I have a team that is absolutely taking ownership of what they do. And of the organization. The reason for me to be more patient is because what I have learned the hard way is that if I have any impatience, it does not create the result that I want.
Yep.
It works counter to the result that I want.
Yep.
And so if I want to support my team to be more effective with the agency that they're already taking, then I have to make sure that I'm not creating greater anxiety for them about living up to those ambitions. Yeah,
good point. What have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
I love my job. I love my work. I love the team. I will say, so, I mentioned we run this Dare to Lead program, and we really we do our level best as a team to live up to that. And so we've done a lot of work to be really explicit about our team culture, about what we call our behavioral aspirations, what's a go, no go. We've articulated these really clearly. We use them for recruitment tools now. We think about things like, that it is not okay for people on our team to talk behind each other's backs, that if you have an issue with somebody, you're not dealing with them directly, you're part of the problem.
Yep.
That being said, sometimes it can be really challenging. If I have an issue with you, it might be really challenging for me to face you directly. So we've explicitly encouraged people to seek support. I might go to somebody and say, hey, I'm having this big challenge with Troy. Can you help me think it through so I can show up most constructively to deal with Troy with this issue? So we've been really intentional about that. And so, the most difficult about this is that it means that I've got to fucking live up to it. It means that my team is not only entitled, but authorized and explicitly encouraged to call me out when I'm not, living up to that aspiration for the kind of leader I want to be. And I both love that. And also I'm just like, how come I have to be so perfect? Leave me alone. So yeah.
That's great. What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love the process of seeing growing a small business is a creative endeavor. We often don't think about it as creativity, right? When we think about creativity, we think about design and arts and stuff. I wrote an article, I write a fair bit, and I wrote an article years ago, which I'm happy to send to you, which is in which I outlined what I called my reverse theory of entrepreneurial relativity. You mentioned Einstein before, right?
Yep.
So reverse theory of so Einstein's deal is, E equals mc squared, energy equals mass, and mass equals energy, and you can convert them back and forth using this equation. And the equation tells you that for the corresponding amount of energy associated with a given amount of mass is huge, right? So it's like the speed of light squared times that amount of mass that's how much energy it works out to, right? Which is why if you bust open a few atoms, you can level a city. Obviously, gross exaggeration, but you know what I'm talking about, right? If you can unlock the energy within that mass, then the impact is profound. So my reverse theory of entrepreneurial relativity is that the act of being an entrepreneur is the act of bringing something into manifested existence that was not there previously, that only existed as energy, as ideas before that. And so the amount of energy that it takes to bring something into existence that did not exist before is basically the speed of light squared times the thing you're trying to build, which is why being an entrepreneur is so overwhelming and exhausting. It takes your whole heart and your soul and years and blood, sweat, toil, tears, like all of it in order to make something happen. And I love that process. It's so satisfying to see it, look, it's a thing, it's alive. It's like a bought one now. Like we built that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shoot through the article. We'll link through to it in the show notes. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure.
What's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
I'd say the biggest mindset shift for me has been, it comes back to what I was talking about earlier about patience, is about where my focus needs to be and how I need to show up if I want to be able to take the business past the breakers.
Yep.
So I mentioned before about using the runway metaphor. Another metaphor I use all the time is the breakers. And I've had in my former lives lots of experience building and running small teams. I've had governance experience of larger organizations, 200 plus employees. This particular focus that I have now is on taking organization past the breakers. So it's not the small team, that one person can feasibly oversee. And that shift in my mindset about, where my attention needs to be and how I need to empower other people to get the organization past the point where I can feasibly oversee all of it. That's been a pretty major undertaking for me.
Yep. And what's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Forgiveness in order to lead to resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we talk about in Dare to Lead a lot is the Stockdale paradox, which comes from Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was in the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. And Admiral Stockdale's plane was shot down over North Vietnam in 1965. He was taken prisoner and held captive in the infamous Hanoi Hilton for 7.5 years as a prisoner of war. Underwent horrific torture, had to do horrific things in order to survive. And when he got out, Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and Built to Last, interviewed Admiral Stockdale, and he said, what was the difference between you and the people who didn't make it? And the kind of question behind the question was, the people who didn't make it through, did they have anything in common? And Admiral Stockdale says, yeah, absolutely. The people who didn't make it through, those were the optimists. Those were the ones who said, oh, we'll be home by Christmas, and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. And they say, we'll be home by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go. And they say, we'll be home by Thanksgiving, November, Thanksgiving would come and go. And he said, Christmas would roll around again and they would die of a broken heart.
Yep.
He said, the ones who made it through were the ones who never confused total faith that they would prevail in the end, which is something you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, no matter how difficult they may be.
Mm-hmm.
So that combination, that total faith that we will prevail with the discipline to confront the brutal facts, that became known as the Stockdale paradox. And this willingness to go, and the reason I say forgiveness is because often the reason we don't confront those difficult kind of those brutal facts of our current reality is because often those brutal facts are present because we fucked up in some way.
Yep.
Right? We made some devastating mistake. And without forgiveness, there's no way we want to look at that because it'll mean the end of us. Right.
Yep.
And so that ability to go, wow, I just did that, and that was terrible. That created a disaster, put us in financial strife, create a problem with my team, create a problem with my client. I've got to like deal with it, right? To be able to go, okay, I'm not going to beat myself up for that, but I'm going to face it 100%. I'm going to be accountable for it. I'm going to do what I need to make it right. And so having that ability to forgive yourself so that you can be accountable for things and therefore be resilient, I think that's the number one habit to cultivate.
Jump over to growasmallbusiness.com and leave your details to get a short 2-minute email I send on Fridays to help small business owners like you become better leaders. I include some reading or professional development resources I've discovered in the last week. And can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah. So one of the things that I actually have, one of the surprises for me is I found that I really enjoy recruitment.
Yep.
For me, recruitment, I get this feeling when we're recruiting that it's like opening presents under the tree. Like you never know what kind of treasure you're going to find. And it's always exciting. It's like going and sitting down in a movie and the lights go down and you're like, oh, is this going to be awesome? Right. And it could be terrible. Who knows? So a couple of things that we do. One is we do a multi-stage process, no matter what role we're recruiting for.
Good to hear.
We do a multi-stage process, and that process includes a pretty forgiving initial stage where we create a long list. And with the long list, we do 20-minute Zoom chats with everybody on the long list. And the Zoom chats are really just because what we find is that the CV is never enough.
Yep.
Right? Never enough to feel like you have any kind of sense of somebody. 20 minutes isn't enough to know whether you want to be with someone, but it is enough to be able to say hard no to some people. So that's really just about efficiency.
Well, things like people not even turning up or turning up late, cut, you're so cut, they're gone.
Yeah. One of the things we do is we go with those 20 minutes, we leave them intentionally really unstructured. And we'll say, it's basically half an opportunity for you to tell us a bit about yourself and, what led you to apply for the role, and half an opportunity for you to ask us any questions so you can determine whether we're the right organization for you. Mm-hmm. And how people choose to manage those 10 minutes tells us heaps about them, right? So we get a lot of information for those 20 minutes. Then we go into a more robust session. When we get to the more robust session, we'll often have a task. And that task, again, will tell us heaps about how people think, how they choose to allocate their time, how excited they are about the role. We don't ask for that task until we feel pretty excited about a candidate, because it's an investment in their time. But we find that having a really robust process has been one of the things that's been most useful. The other thing I would say is Never, ever, 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 ever hire someone based on only, unless it's your very first hire ever. And even then, I try to avoid if I can. Never hire someone based on only one person's assessment.
Yeah.
If it's your very first hire, get a friend, a
Yep.
critical friend to come in and watch with you, because we are all such creatures of bias and prejudice.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have a second pair of eyes, someone will come in, and because they're using the same cologne that your first boyfriend wore, you'll be like, that person's awesome. And the other person will be like, what? But they basically told you to your face that they lied to their former employer or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, so yeah, always have extra.
No, it's really good to hear that you have such a robust recruitment procedure, because I just think small business owners particularly go short on this. They're too busy, they're slammed. We need someone in the seat now, and they pay for it. Obviously, down the track, they get a B or a C grade or an arsehole on the team.
Yeah. So two more top thoughts on that topic. One is, there's a saying in Spanish. So my third home country is Argentina. That's where my mother grew up. I've got lots of family there, oldest friends from there. There's a saying in Argentina, which is lo barato sale caro, which is the cheap thing ends up expensive.
Yeah.
So that's the, hire slow, fire fast kind of concept. But the other thing that I would say, a big lesson that we learned the hard way, was when we first started, we grew the team to seven or eight people, and we had no men on the team.
Right.
And when we got to about 5, we were like, we'd really like some men on the team, and we'd try to look for men, but we were really struggling. And I was kind of embarrassed about this, because I felt like every excuse that I had for why we didn't have men was exactly the same excuse for why men say they can't hire women.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, they didn't put their hand up, the most qualified candidate, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I'm like, clearly I must be saying wrong. And I was talking to a guy in Australia. Actually, I was at a thing in Sydney with a YPO group. And this guy I was talking to, I was telling him, I was like, we've got a diversity problem on our team. And he says, you need to do the opposite to what we do. And I said, what's that? He said, well, on our team, we had to do a whole bunch of reviewing of our ads to make sure we weren't inadvertently using language that was alienating to women. We had to check like where we were advertising, how we were, what networks we were tapping. And so what we do now is, before we put any ad up, we have men review it.
Yep.
To just test the language. We have men on the recruitment team to help us see things again that we don't see. And I'm happy to say we've improved our gender diversity. We've got men on the team. We've got gender non-binary folk on the team. We're looking a lot better.
Great. Was there anything else on adding people to the team? Was there a third point? No, that's it. Great. All right, I'll move on to, what are some things you'd recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Yeah. So the biggest thing there is that every single organization has a culture. The question is it explicit and intentional, or is it emergent and by default? And in my experience, the only way to get and maintain a kick-ass culture is for it to be explicit and intentional.
Agreed.
So that's the first point. The second point is, when we talk about it being explicit and intentional, and this is an area that I'm particularly passionate about because we work with a lot of organizations on their culture. One of the things that most organizations do is they go, well, we've got our values. We've got our core values. They are, have fun, be honest, work hard, and, maintain integrity. And, okay, that's fine. But what we find is that values by themselves are utterly useless if you have not explicitly and intentionally translated them into extremely tangible behaviors, number one. And then number two, operationalize those behaviors to where they're feeding into not only recruitment, but performance management, but team discussions, but regular reflection on how the organization is living up to those behaviors. We now do team surveys. Again, we're a small organization, right? Going on 11 people now here in New Zealand. We do surveys, regular surveys of, how well are we doing as a team at living into this behavior? Self-reflection, how well am I doing? What's something I could be doing? What's something we could be doing right now? We bring them to life in very tangible ways every day. And you can download, if you go to the Boma New Zealand website, you can download the top line behavioral aspirations are on the site, but you can download the more detailed version of them to get a sense of what I'm talking about. And I feel like it's again one of those, like, it's like taking time with the recruitment process. It's one of those things, it takes a lot of time. And when you're a small resource constrained organization going, we've got 500 things we want to get done, how can we be spending time on this? It is the most valuable investment we can make.
Totally agree. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Well, 6 years ago, I met a guy who became my partner and made me a stepmom of 3 gorgeous boys, um, who are 2 days shy of 13, 11, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And they saved me when it comes to balance. And
Yep.
it all ties together with the patience and with kind of getting a more of a level of maturity of, not being so kind of aggressive and harsh on people and going, let's go, let's go, let's go. Because if I didn't have them, I could happily work, 20 hours a day, every day. And I would not be a better leader for it at all.
No.
I'd be a worse leader for it. And
I went
so,
through the same thing, and particularly nearly 8 years ago now, when my daughter came along, that certainly changed my perspective on work and balance. Yeah.
and it's wild because I think, sometimes people think, oh, well, my daughter came along and now I'm working less, or, I've got these 3 stepsons. And so now I can't dedicate as much time as I would have previously to the organization. But like I say, I feel like having this family has made me a far more effective leader than
Yep.
if I did not. So
Totally.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I agree.
counterintuitive in that way.
Yeah. And how much professional development did you invest over the years?
Oh man. I love to learn. We're a learning organization. I was saying to a friend yesterday that one of the ways you could define my career is that I'm kind of like a squirrel. Like, I'm like a sharing squirrel. I'm a little sharing squirrel. And I go around and I learn new things, and they're like little gems that I uncover, and then I bring them back and I'm like, look what I found. I found this cool little gem thing that I learned. So, my life is professional development, basically. And whether that's self-led or whether that's learning things that I can then sell, but that also translate to how I lead and how we run the organization. So Dare to Lead is a perfect example of that. Doing that training was absolutely so that I could facilitate the material for others, but 100% informed how I lead and how we run things, our team culture. So yeah, I feel like if I were not learning new things, I'd be a sad turtle.
Was it Henry Ford that said, if you're not learning, you're old?
There you go.
What about mentors or coaches? Have you had them along the way? You can
Oh
share.
my gosh, so many. I just wrote an article actually yesterday. So you should share this one too if you're going to share any of
Yeah,
my
sure.
articles. But
Yeah,
so I
great.
wrote an article 2 days ago because a friend of mine, and this article I think would be really relevant to your audience. A friend of mine is a little bit getting raked over the coals in the New Zealand media right now because his business went bust, and there's some grumpy shareholders. And so I wrote an article about this, about the first couple businesses that I had that did not turn out well, and the fact that there was a woman here in New Zealand. Her name's Melissa Clark Reynolds. And when after I moved here, I went to this like networking luncheon, and she was the speaker. This is when we met. And there's maybe 20 women. We're all sitting around this like big U-shaped table, and she has us go around the room, and everybody introduces themselves. And it got to me, and I said, my name's Kaila. I started 2 businesses and they both failed. And her immediate, like, no hesitation response was, you need to start another business immediately before you forget everything you learned from those first 2.
That's a great perspective.
Oh my gosh, it changed my life. It completely changed my life. And, she became a mentor and then a friend and then a business partner. We're still working together today. I mean, the number of people who have taught me with patience and with love, like how to be a more of a grown-up or a better human being. The gratitude that I have for people who put up with the person that I was, like, it's just, yeah.
What about board of directors or advisors at the moment?
We currently do not have a board of directors at Boma New Zealand. The founders are the board at Boma Global. Advisors regularly, I'm constantly checking in with people who have wisdom to share. None of us is ever the smartest person in the room, or definitely in the world, right? And so the richer the perspective we can bring to something, the more likely we are to do well.
Right, Kyla, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
The hardest thing in growing a small business, I reckon it's keeping the faith.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping the faith and like balancing. One of the things I found is, sorry, I use so many different metaphors, they're all jumbled around in my head, but one of the ones I've been using lately is that if we're only looking forward to where we want to go, you say, how do you know when you've achieved success? I'm like, success? What are you on about? We haven't achieved success. Because if I'm looking forward up the mountain, I'm like, man, that summit is so far away and it's not even the actual summit. I'm going to get there. There's going to be another summit beyond it. Like, what are you even thinking about? Right.
Yeah.
But if I look back, I'm like, oh man, look how high we are. Like we started way down there in the parking lot and you can't even see it now. The cars look like little specks of dust. Like, look how far we've come. And so that, keeping the faith to me is like that thing of going, okay, yes, we have so far to go and so much to do. And there's so many challenges ahead and it's all going to be difficult. And look how far we've come and look at what we've accomplished and where we are today.
Favorite business book, which has helped you the most?
Again, so many. I love to read. The Jim Collins ones are fantastic. Built to Last, Good to Great, both of them awesome. The E-Myth was one I read a long time ago. It's again an oldie but a goodie, understanding that distinction between the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur.
My number one. Yep.
Dare to Lead, a terrific one, obviously that we use all the time. I would say so. There's some books that are. So you're saying business book only. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I've been listening to the Dare to Lead podcast lately because it's helping keep me, in line with that material. Other than that, I'm a little obsessed with U.S. politics. So I listen to a lot of political podcasts and then a lot of show tunes. There's a musical in my head at all times. So you're lucky I haven't broken out into song in this interview.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
G Suite.
Love Google G Suite, Google Docs and Sheets, and just amazing technology. Final, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Day one of starting out, I would say, at the risk of repeating myself, be patient.
Yep.
Give yourself grace.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time today, Kyla. I think the audience will get a shit ton of value out of what you shared with us. Congratulations on your journey so far, from 3 team members starting out in New Zealand up to your 11th now you've just started. A lot of great gems in there. So thank you very much. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.